Hello again. Welcome to another episode of Leading from Alignment with our good friend, John Opalewski. How are you today, John?
Jim, I'm good. I'm glad we got to visit for a few minutes
Yeah,
before we recorded, and just appreciate your friendship. Thanks for
yeah,
journeying with me all these years. We've been doing this now over 3 years, and
that's crazy.
thanks for
This
your
is this is what, episode 206?
206. Yeah,
So we've been doing this for at least 206 weeks together, which is
yes, almost
crazy.
4 years,
Almost
almost four.
4 years. Wow, you look great. I think that people would notice they saw the first episode and this one that our hairstyles haven't changed at all. That
Right.
I may have grown an extra chin, but other than that, I think we both are hanging in there. So I love the series that we're doing, the leadership thoughts. Why don't you introduce Pod 206 to us today and kind of where we're heading?
Sure. Yeah, last week in 205 we did leadership and effective communication. Today
Yeah,
I want to talk together about leadership and seismos moments. And this word seismos is a Greek word that we find in scripture, and it's where we get the English word earthquake from.
yeah,
And I'd
yeah,
like to start today. We don't normally do this, but I'd like to start today reading just a short passage of scripture that I'm sure almost every one of our listeners and watchers is familiar with. It's
yeah,
in Matthew chapter 8, and it says, Then Jesus got into the boat, and his disciples followed him. And without warning, a furious storm came up on the lake. And I want to stop there for a minute and say,
yeah,
some storms you can see coming if you're paying attention. And then there are
yeah,
other storms that just descend on you with no warning.
yeah,
This was one of those, no warning.
yeah,
And it was such a furious storm that the waves swept over the boat, but Jesus was sleeping.
yeah.
How dare Jesus sleep while bad things are going on in my life?
Doesn't he know I'm having a bad day? Yeah, yeah,
And so the disciples, passage goes on to say the disciples went and woke him, saying, Lord, save us, we're going to drown.
yeah,
And Jesus replies to them, You of little faith, why are you so afraid? And then he gets up and he rebukes the wind and the
mm,
waves, and it's completely calm. And
mm,
that passage ends with this: the men were amazed and asked, What kind of man is this? Even the winds and the waves obey him. It's
yeah.
just a classic
It is. Yeah,
passage.
yeah.
And leadership has its stormy moments, doesn't it?
Yes, it does. Matter of fact, and some you can see coming, and some you
Yeah.
can't see coming. Yeah,
Yeah. And in Matthew describes this particular storm as a furious storm, and the Greek word is
yeah.
seismos.
Okay.
And that's a
Yeah.
word that we normally use to describe an earthquake. In other
Right.
words,
Seismic.
this
Yeah.
right, this was no garden variety storm. And we see the reaction of the disciples. It was panic. And in their panic state, those experienced sailors momentarily
Yeah.
forgot
Yeah.
who was in the boat with them.
Yeah.
And they wake him up and said, Lord, don't you care that we're in this mess?
Right.
And I think I would bet, if I was a betting man, I would bet that some of them had this thought cross their mind. How can he be sleeping at a time like this?
Yeah.
Jesus, don't you care?
Yeah.
And
Right.
Jim, have you ever been there?
Oh yeah. Yeah. I have. Yeah. It's funny because the Mark's version of the same story, Mark chapter 4, Peter specifically goes to Jesus and says, "Don't you care if we
Mhm.
drowned?" And
Yeah.
you go back to David, Psalms 22, my God, why have you forsaken me? You go to Jesus on the cross, the same thing. I think the greatest temptation that the human soul can face is opposition without presence. That I'm facing
Mhm.
something and I can't find you. I think this is why this is
Yep.
Jesus's last temptation on the cross, is to face the pain of everything he's going through in the center of his Father's will, but not being able to sense that presence. He had to be tempted in every way we're tempted,
Yep.
yet without sin. And I think that was saved for last, because that is the key temptation of mankind: is I don't feel you right now, and I
Mm.
I can't find you, and I'm in pain. And So
right.
I mean, that really shakes your faith, right? If your faith is based on feelings, you're in really big trouble in that moment.
Yeah. And as leaders, we have a variety of storms that get tossed our
Yeah.
way.
Yes, we do.
Um, a personal loss of health. Um, I'm telling you from personal experience, depression
Yeah.
is a seismos moment.
Yeah. Yeah.
And one of the scariest parts, Jim, of my depression all those years ago was for the first time in my walk with God, I couldn't feel him near me.
Right. Right.
And when
Wow.
I prayed, I felt I felt totally disconnected from the Lord. I wasn't
Yeah. Yeah. Right.
disconnected from the Lord, but it felt like that. And it was
Right.
absolutely terrifying.
Yeah.
So depression, anxiety, can be a storm in the life of a leader. The loss of people who leave for no apparently sound reason, and the pain that accompanies that. Jim, we wrote an entire book
Yeah.
on that subject about 4 years ago called Putting the Good in Goodbye.
Yeah.
Um, the stinging criticism of some people who stay
Yeah.
and feel
Yeah.
it's their ministry to tell
Uh,
you everything that's on their mind.
yeah.
Or I've heard board members say things like, and I don't know if they knew how insulting what they were saying was, but my job is to make sure our pastor doesn't do anything stupid.
Yeah.
Um, and and that can be
Hmm.
storm in the life of a
Yeah.
leader. Um, and I'm just giving you some examples
Right.
here. The
Right.
infidelity of a teammate
Yeah.
that is both personally heartbreaking and puts the organization you lead in a very vulnerable spot.
Yeah.
Anything that makes you feel like either your personal life or your leadership life is spinning out of control can be considered a genuine seismos moment. Um, and I remember this was Laura and I were in Traverse City. Boy, this was probably 7 years ago, 8 years ago, and I have video of this. And we were leaving her aunt's house. We had spent a wonderful day with her aunt and uncle, and we had some of our kids with us, and it was just great. And they live in this beautiful spot, overlooking
Yeah.
the water. We get out of house and we're going down their driveway, and a big shelf cloud is coming
Mm.
over the Grand Traverse Bay. And I said,
Yeah.
Laura, this is not going to be good.
Yeah.
And within 5 minutes, there were trees and there were parts of
Wow.
buildings flying everywhere. You
Wow.
could see that thing coming.
Yeah.
We had a little bit of advance notice, and that's true in leadership, right? That sometimes there are warning signs that we need to pay attention to.
Yeah.
You know, let's just take our staff for a minute. Now, I'm going totally off notes here, so I'm not
Yeah.
sure where we're going here. But as a leader, I've had some thoughts about my staff at times where I think, I don't know if they're happy or
Mm.
something's going on with them, or they seem troubled and
Yeah.
ignored it. And all to find out later that they were going through something
Yeah.
and they
Yeah.
needed me to pay
Mm.
attention. And what could have been
Mm.
a garden variety storm
Right.
turned into a major storm, into a
Right.
seismos moment. I want what you think about. Well, I mean, I've been talking a lot here, Jim. I want to just
Yeah.
turn the mic over to you here. Give me some feedback. Give me some of your thoughts on this.
I think, excuse me, I think one of the things that makes these seismos moments so painful is the misunderstanding that if I'm following God and I'm walking in obedience, that my life should look a lot more like heaven than hell.
Mhm.
A thoroughly unbiblical narrative, if we take the book of Acts as an example.
Yes.
Um, so I think if I'm standing on a beach and all of a sudden the person next to me is blown away, I go, what in the world? This is Miami Beach. Only to discover it's not Miami Beach. It's Omaha Beach. It makes a lot more sense in combat that there's risk, there's danger, there's casualties. Your expectation on Omaha Beach on D-Day is much different than Miami Beach on the 4th of July, although they're both probably
Right.
as deadly as the other nowadays. But that thought that, that I'm on vacation, like this is supposed to be like heaven. Well, there are things in this earth that are much like heaven. Let your kingdom come, let your will be done. But there's also things in this earth that are nothing like heaven. They're far more like hell. And we are in the whirlwind of both the good things and the bad things. So
That's
I
right.
think that surprise of no, I'm following God. I'm regular in attendance. I'm tithing. I'm a leader. I've made sacrifices. So my life is to be a blessed entity, period. But we forget that we're also leaders, which means we have to lead others that are going through hard things. We have no comfort to give them unless we've been comforted. We have no testimony to give them unless we've been tested. It's a
Yeah.
thoroughly unbiblical expectation of God that getting in the boat is always going to be a garden cruise. Sometimes it's going to
Yeah.
be the middle of the night, the middle of the lake, the middle of the storm, because you're going to come out of that storm with stories, testimony, comfort,
Mm.
faith, power, failure, humility. I understanding how much farther there is to grow. Imagine a
Sure.
leader that is nothing but blessed and preaching to a congregation that is not. It almost feels separate. Like you are
Yes.
so holy and I am so cursed. Well, no, I think our those that we lead need to know that we've been through storms. Even when we're in storms, we need to talk about them because this is Omaha Beach, baby. This is not
Yeah.
Miami Beach. And so the
Right.
fact that the guy standing next to you got his marriage head blown off, you go, that's because we live in a sin-soaked world. But that's what happens on Omaha Beach. So what do we do
Yeah.
now? We save the ones we can. We take ground. We move forward. So
Yeah.
yeah, I think seismos moments. I'm glad they're just moments. I'm glad they're just
Yeah.
contractions, but
Right.
they should not surprise us, and we should not be ill prepared in our faith, in our
Sure.
defense, in our soul for difficult times.
So if you're listening today or watching today and you're going through a furious storm,
Yeah,
um, sometimes Jesus will calm that storm around you immediately when you cry out to him.
yeah,
And sometimes he'll calm you in the
yeah,
middle of that storm, even though it doesn't stop. Either way, the one that you serve, Jesus, is Lord of your
yeah.
seismos.
Yes,
He's
he is.
Lord of that. And when you're in the middle of it, Jim, all I want to do is get out of the middle of it.
Yeah,
I want to get to a place where have my feet on solid ground,
yeah,
and at least I have the feeling of that. And there are those moments where the Lord, in this particular moment, the Lord instantly calmed it. But if we're honest, then, and I think we all want that, but there are times when the storm doesn't stop for a while, and He gives you peace on the inside that
yeah,
passes understanding. I think
yeah,
Philippians chapter 4 talks to us about that it's possible to have peace. And I think here's where I've kind of landed with this, Jim, and I'm curious what you think. If Jesus is in the boat with me, no matter what I'm going through, I'm going to be okay.
yeah. Right.
What do you think about that thought?
Yeah, I think you say what is their problem in the boat, and what is my problem when I face storms? It's not the nearness of Jesus. He was right there.
Yeah,
It's not that they're in a storm. That's going to happen sooner or later. It's not the oars, the boat, the sails, the rudder. What's the problem? I think Jesus solves it at the end. He said, "Why are you still so afraid? Do you still not trust me?" In essence, the problem is not the storm. The problem is not the darkness. The problem is not the wind. The problem is you don't believe that I'm actually capable and I'm working, that all things are coming together for good. And it makes sense, right? I mean, I think these stories are there for posterity because we all have our storms.
yes,
We all have our middle of the nights. We all have our panic moments. But Jesus identifies the problem. The problem was not the storm, guys. The problem was not imminent death. The problem was not the velocity of the wind, the darkness of the night, the size of the waves, the seaworthiness of the craft. The problem was in the middle of it, you looked at those things. And that's why the storm got inside of you. You're in the storm, but the storm has to be in, it doesn't have to be in you. When
That's
I'm
good.
greater in you than the storm, then storms come and go. If the storm is greater than I am, and you put your faith in storms, you put your faith in death, you put your faith in failure, defeat. The deacon that says, "I'm here to keep the pastor from being stupid," like the seasons of a ministry where it's deacon possessed, by men
Yeah.
who are not worthy of that title. Their attitudes are unworthy of that title.
Right.
Those things come and go, but Jesus
Yeah.
stays. And just saying, regardless of the storm, regardless of the waves, regardless of the deacon possession, regardless of the circumstances, I'm going to put my trust in you. Now look at Scripture. People who did that, who worship in Philippian jails in the middle of the night, what happens to
Mm.
them? Who
Yeah.
who are faithful to God in the lion's den, who get thrown in the fiery furnace, but do so trusting, the God we serve will rescue us from your hand. You know what I mean?
Right.
But even if he doesn't, we're not going to bow. The people that live that way, these are the Hebrews chapter 11 Hall of Faith people, and it's
Yeah.
not the size of their giants. It's the size of their faith in the God who kills them or moves them, or so I think there's two kinds of faith, John. I think there's the kind that moves mountains, and there's the kind that gets buried it gets pounded by the mountain, and from underneath all that debris, you still hear the voice saying, "I trust you anyway." Those
Yeah.
people will always come through. They'll always be delivered. Their leadership will always stand. So, I
Yeah.
wish this wasn't true. I wish we could pray a prayer and rub a lamp, and the genie named
Mm.
Jesus would come out and move all of our obstacles. That's not
No.
faith. That's not right. That's not trust. So I got to trust him when I'm disappointed in his answer. I have to trust him when I don't understand, and the peace comes that passes
Yeah.
reason. A reasonable person would not have peace here, but I do because I'm here with Jesus.
Yeah.
It might have peace that passes understanding. That it's a great sermon to preach. It's a great altar call to give. But man, is it hard when you're when you're when
When
you're
you're in the
burying
middle.
children and having marriage issues and the church is falling apart and your best friends are now your worst enemies. And I'm not making light of these hellish moments, but remember that the
Right.
King of Heaven is with you, and he'll get you through it. And
Yeah.
you got to hold on. Those are your only option. Hold on or let go. You let go, you solve the problem. Hold on tighter. You have the problem, but you also have God. That
Yeah.
solves these problems.
So if you're going through a seismos moment today, just a couple of thoughts, and then Jim wrap us up.
Yeah.
It's okay to get on your knees and cry out to Jesus.
Is it ever? Yeah.
Um, I think that's a good idea. Secondly, get on the phone and call your safest, most trusted friend
Yeah.
and let them know what's going on. Reach out to a coach who can serve as a sounding board to you. And
Yeah.
lastly, please resist the temptation to jump out of the boat
Yeah.
because of what you're going through. Um, reach out to the Lord, reach out to a great friend, and reach out to a dispassionate third party who will listen
Yeah.
and reflect back to you some truth. Um,
Yeah.
I think those are the responses, Jim, that give us the best shot at navigating seismos
Yeah.
type storms as a
I
leader.
agree. I agree. It's funny. You go back to that boat in the middle of the lake, in the middle of the night, in the middle of the storm. If one of those guys would have said, "Hey, what if we just woke up Jesus and didn't accuse his character? Let's try that." Or if someone had been through 5 storms like that and woke up Jesus every time, well, he knows what to do. I think the problem is you have a group of people that are they're all scared of
Yeah,
everything. I mean, Peter knows he's dying because he was raised on that lake. Matthew, I think, is looking at Peter because Matt's a tax collector. I don't know if he's ever been on the water before. I don't know if he can even swim. But when he sees the look on Peter's face, he knows he's in mortal danger. So
right.
everybody believed the lie that was so real it was hard not to believe it, and everybody ignored Jesus until it was time to blame somebody for their problem. But I think if one person would have said, "Hey, listen, it's a storm. Let's wake him up. Listen, he calms storms." I think the narrative would have been different. So I
Yeah,
like I like your thought of call somebody that maybe has been through these sorts of storms. If you're a young
yeah,
pastor, call an old one. If you're a
yeah,
new father, call somebody that's raising teenagers. If you're raising teenagers, call someone who's got some kids that have made it into adulthood with their faith intact. Whatever you're going through,
yeah,
because
that's
I
good.
remember your first year as a senior pastor. It went up in the
Yes.
spring, attendance went up, and then went down in the summer. You thought we're growing, oh we're failing, and then went up in the fall, oh we're growing, and the winter went down. Well, you don't have data to compare it to where you realize every spring, summer, winter, fall has its own
Yeah,
dynamics. So you thought you're
right.
succeeding, you're failing, you're succeeding, you're failing, you're not. You have nothing to base it against. So, but after 10 years, you look at the data, you expect things, and they don't have
Yeah,
the same power over you because the narrative has changed. So, in that same way, find someone who's been there for 10 years and ask them, is this what always happens in summertime? Do people always bolt to their cottage? Yes. Well, you're not failing as a pastor then. Your storm has now survived because of walking with someone who has some experience, some wisdom. So I think that talk to God on your knees and cry out, talk to people who have experience.
mhm.
This is brilliant, John. Very practical. Thank you for this. Where were you 28 years ago when I thought I was failing and then succeeding and failing? I needed this. I needed this information. So,
I needed it
so
too, by the way. I wouldn't have been
yeah,
able to offer it to you 28 years ago.
yeah. It's funny. Summer's over with. What's summer? Well, that's the time of year where everybody goes and takes their money with them. And then, fall, September, October, you start making up the deficits. But we said
Yeah,
it the other day, right? The July, there's more people telling you they want to resign in July than the other
yeah,
11 months combined. Why
that's
is that?
correct.
Because they're in a new storm, and it's you don't have to be there alone. There are people that have been through the storm dozens of
Yeah.
times, and I guess that's where Converge can come in, and the team of coaches that you've recruited that do a fabulous job. Like, let us walk beside you in these moments where you need a second confirming voice, you need some encouragement, you need prayer, you need that safe third party. So, God bless you, our dear listeners and watchers, because we have been through storms, and we've
Mm.
seen Jesus calm them, and we're going to go through storms, and we're going to need other people's wisdom and counsel, through every season of life. So we're praying for you. We're cheering for you. We love you and we believe in you. You can do this. With God's help, you can do this. And if you need our help, come call us. We'll wake up Jesus together, and
Right.
he'll calm. He'll be involved in your storm in a way you never dreamed. So God bless you. Live long and prosper. We're cheering for you as you continue to lead from alignment.